Both basically you're listening to two idiots. But by the way, I wanted to mention this guy. Did I mention this guy before? Dr. Berg, fucking scam artist, by the way. And the problem with this guy, look, he's got 13 million followers now. This is scary. And you got everybody that believes this guy. Now, first of all, let me explain this. First of all, FYI, he's a Scientologist, okay? Like Grant Cardone, which should tell you enough, all you need to know right there. This guy is, he's a chiropractor. So whenever I see a chiropractor call himself a doctor, that tells me they're a scammer. Anybody that calls himself a doctor that's not a medical doctor, I think is a scammer. That's my own opinion. You can think whatever you want. Okay. DC, Doctor of Chiropractic. Okay. I mean, calling yourself a doctor, that's like an attorney calling themselves a doctor, right? Doctor of juristic. So that's all. That's already the only red flag I need. But what this guy does is he takes advantage of people not really knowing a lot about physiology and health and human disease and pathology and biochemistry. And let me just go ahead and say, by the way, to be a chiropractor is like pretty much the lowest level in all of allied health. Like, that's like the lowest level. The coursework is like fucking kindergarten. They don't take any real coursework. So, it's just a joke what they take. I mean, they're fucking giving massages. That's what they're doing. Chiropractic. They're giving fucking back massages. What do you think? So I just find it funny how he talks about all this stuff. But anyway, my point is that what the scam behind this guy is he misconstrues things. So he will actually cite to make it seem credible. And I think he got this off of Dr. Mercola, who's another scam artist. He's actually a medical doctor, but he's a DO, which is not an MD, but it's similar. But anyway, they both are selling nutritional bullshit. You all remember I talked about people that selling nutritional supplements are all scammers. So what he does basically in this, and by the way, the prices that he charges for his nutrition, it's like 3 and 4 times what he basically buys it from a vendor and puts his name on it, right? So he brands it. So you're basically paying for the Dr. Berg brand bullshit. It's basically what all these scammers do. Alex Jones is doing it now. But the main thing is what he'll do to make it seem like he's credible is that he will cite oftentimes like a journal article from, whatever, New England Journal of Medicine or something. And because people they're not going to look into it or they don't have the expertise, he actually twists the overall meaning. And so the bottom line is what he says is bullshit in the vast majority of cases. Okay? This guy comes out with so many fucking false claims. He's absolute fraudster. Total fraudster. No doubt about it. In fact, he's probably on the Quack Watch. If you look on Quack Watch, I'd say he's probably on there. Mercola is probably on Quack Watch too, I would say. Quack Watch is some like consumer watchdog. Let's take a look actually. Yeah. So let's see. Dr. Berg. Mercola. Don't see him on here. So, the problem with this nutritional supplement thing is that, it needs to be regulated by the FDA But there's too much bullshit going on, and people are all convinced they need vitamins. They're all convinced they need to take vitamins, and they don't fucking need to take vitamins. And as I mentioned before, people don't even know that, for instance, people think, oh, I'll just take a vitamin, right? Well, guess what? There's certain vitamins that if you take too much, they can be toxic, right? Fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, E, and K. Those are fat-soluble. You can't pee them out. You pee out vitamin C. You can take as much vitamin C as you want. You'll pee it out. But A, D, E, and K, they're fat-soluble. The more you take, the more you accumulate, and they can cause some major problems. But aside from that, and that's the best case scenario is vitamins, right? There's all kinds of horse shit out there. People thinking they can take collagen and it's going to help their skin. Just stupid nonsense. But the big problem, aside from the placebo effect, and that's what it is mainly. If anyone thinks they're doing well, it's a placebo effect. You understand a placebo effect, right? The big problem is a lot of these nutritional supplements, because they're not really regulated, they're made in China. And so they're not safe. Can cause a lot of issues, you see. I mean, you don't know where they're coming from. So Dr. Berg is clearly a fucking scam artist. Just want you all to know that. And you're going to have everybody on there. I mean, you can go on here right now and you can refute some of the bullshit. And in the comment section, you get nothing but cult members. And you're going to have they're going to come and attack you. Okay? So I say, the internet is about creating cults. All these platforms have enabled these people that have their channels to create cults. Because why? Well, think about it, folks. It's all about ad-based content. Think about it. YouTube wants these channel owners to have their own little cult of people to chime in, to engage in the conversation. Why? Each time you add a comment, well, you get notified. You're going to check the response. You go back, another advertisement. You understand? It's all a one big clusterfuck scam. Ad-based content is a scam. Mr. Lubor, I don't need 5 minutes. I don't need 1 minute. Okay, I know his shit is bad. Okay, I'm sure it's bad, but I'm not going to say anything definitive in terms of results until I have definitive evidence. I mentioned earlier that my belief was that just my belief was that probably the gross returns on his real estate investments, the gross returns, probably about half of that gets taken out in fees, so that the net returns that go to investors are probably about 50% of the gross returns. And I actually mentioned my guess. If I had to guess, I would say probably his investors are getting no more than 6%, maybe even 5%. That's just a guess based upon nothing, just based upon what I know about how he nails everybody with fees. But of course, he keeps all that stuff secret because he doesn't want it to get out. The same reason why he markets on YouTube. He goes after the dumb money. He could never market his fund to reasonably intelligent investors who understand the basics of investing, because they would say, this is dog shit, it's too risky, fuck off. You see? It's just pretty obvious. And, so that's why Grant Cardone is targeting YouTube. And that's why Meet Kevin is targeting YouTube. Meet Kevin says, oh gosh, Grant Cardone's pulling this bullshit. I can do it too. Yeah, anybody can do it. You get a big following like Kevin did. Kevin got a big following how? He got a big following by making all these videos every fucking day with the COVID stimulus checks. Okay? I don't know, just people are too stupid every day. The COVID stimulus check update, right? Luring in the most desperate people, the dumbest people. He also went on his Grant Cardone rampage, trashing Cardone, and he became Grant Cardone. He became Grant Cardone. Meet Kevin is much worse than Grant Cardone. Okay? Much worse than Grant Cardone. I'll tell you that right now, in many ways. So, now, if you've got specific investment returns on Grant Cardone that you want to show us, that'd be great. I'll take a look. I'm not expecting anything impressive at all. I would say 6% is probably optimistic after you factor in everything. But, it's probably around 5%. And I'd say much of that comes in the fees. By the time he takes out all his fees, all his expenses, and as I mentioned earlier, what people don't seem to understand, although it's common sense, all this lifestyle that Grant Cardone shows you, he's showing you his jet, he's showing you everything. His investors are paying for that. Those are business costs. He's writing that off not only on taxes for his business, but he's also applying everything to his business. These are expenses that he's claiming as business costs. You see, I can pretty much, I'm willing to bet anybody, any amount of money, anytime Grant Cardone takes a vacation, I'm willing to bet he writes it off as a business expense, at least half of it, right? I'm sure of it. Same thing with Kevin, because I know how these people are. Okay, these guys. You have to understand, these guys they're pathological con men. Think about how they're trying to swindle people into their investments. So they're going to always be swindling everybody. They're going to be swindling everybody all the time. Okay, that's their mindset. That's how they think. That's how they behave. That's how they operate. I actually exposed that whole thing many years ago. I thought about it for a second when I was exposing Peter Schiff's bogus bullshit mutual funds, and I posted the prospectus about 10 years ago. And of course, Peter Schiff, what nobody knows in the world except for me, is that Peter Schiff actually he launched mutual funds. Why? Because once his performance got out, he was afraid more people would reveal their account statements and show what a fucking loser his investment firm was. So what he did instead was he basically got rid of most of the individually managed accounts, the separately managed accounts, and he started mutual funds. You see, the problem with that is now everybody can see how shitty his mutual funds are. Severely underperform the S&P, all of them, and since inception. So anyway, when I was exposing his mutual funds, his very high fees, I looked at the prospectus and I saw that the fees that weren't included in the expense ratio were fees related to marketing. And I thought to myself, well, I know how Peter Schiff is. Every time this guy, this fucking clown, he's always jet setting around to go in some speaking event, some bullshit, because, Peter Schiff is like all these guys. They make money with their mouths. They're all hat and no show. They're all hot air. So I'm sure every time he goes, he's gonna tag the business expense to his mutual funds, because anytime he can say, well, I was talking about this, but I mentioned my mutual fund. You see, I know how these guys operate. Basically, any way a slimy snake, right, can pull one over on somebody, that's what they're going to do. And by the way, what I understand is Grant Cardone now, if you call into his company, and you can ask to see the prospectus, or I guess it's the PPM, the private placement memorandum for his real estate investments, they won't give it to you unless you agree to not show it publicly. That's right. They won't release a PPM unless you agree legally to not release it to the public. That's how afraid they are They don't want the public to know what's going on. It's the same thing with the way these guys operate. They don't, you understand, everything with these swindlers, it's the same song and dance. They make sure and isolate themselves away from any scrutiny, away from any criticism, because they want to talk to their audience, their cult members. They want to feed their cult members their bullshit. They don't want anyone around who's going to spoil their party, who's going to expose them. Just like with his investments. He doesn't want the truth about his investments to get out there. He doesn't want someone to go through and say, oh, I see, look at all these fees you're charging. Oh, look at this. Oh, we got to keep our money held for 10 years. It's funny. Grant Cardone talks about 401k where you can't get your money out for many years. Well, guess what? You invest in his fucking real estate bullshit. Well, you can't pull your money out for, I think it's at least 10 years. Okay, so there's no liquidity. You have zero liquidity. Folks, once again, anybody out there who wants to invest in real estate, you buy yourself a professionally managed, publicly traded real estate investment trust. That's what you do. Okay? That's what you do. You don't give it to some fucking huckster. Don't ever invest in a real estate company, because now what's happening is they're all flooding everywhere because of the laws, the securities laws that changed several years ago. Okay? So now you can actually openly solicit to the public private placements, private equity, and even crowdfunding. You can do that. Before you couldn't do that. So now there's a way for swindlers to reach the dummies. And they're all being swindled into the fundraising, all this bullshit. Okay? Guaranteed, folks, those real estate investment companies, if they're not publicly traded, it's because they're not good enough. They don't have good enough people, and they don't have good enough returns. You understand? It's just a fact. Or they would be publicly traded if they could. They're not. Why would they be publicly traded? Well, think about it. If you're a real estate investment trust, you want access to capital. If you're on the stock market, you have amazing access to capital. These guys don't have that good of access to capital. Why do you think Grant Cardone is going to keep you locked up into his real estate investments for 10 years? Okay? You understand. You see? That's the deal. So, but you see, people don't know basics about investing. They don't know this basic information that I'm telling you guys. Okay? This is very basic. And it comes from my understanding of having worked in the capital markets, understanding what's going on. You know, I probably wouldn't have, if I didn't work on Wall Street, you know, I probably wouldn't understand this. But I know for a fact there's an enormous difference between publicly traded real estate investment trusts and bullshit like what Grant Cardone is selling. I mean, you're talking about, I'd stay the fuck away from anything that's not publicly traded. I'm telling you right now. I'd stay far away from it. Okay? It's kind of like I would compare publicly traded real estate investment trusts versus these Grant Cardone, Meet Kevin type of shit. I would compare that to, let's say, real estate investment trusts, or like versus, let's say, if there were such a thing as a real estate investment trust that was like a penny stock, right? So in other words, I would consider what Cardone and Kevin and all these guys are doing as penny stocks, where you don't have the required disclosure, you don't have the oversight. Penny stocks, because of the way that they are, when they're not listed, they're over the counter, they're bulletin board, they don't have to comply with the same regulatory standards as stocks that are listed on the NYSE, right? So they don't have to have all these securities filings to disclose a lot of things, so they can hide a lot of shit, you see? Which, that's right there what I told you, most investors don't even fucking know, by the way. So I would actually compare what these guys are doing with their private real estate investment trust. I would compare those to penny stocks. And penny stocks are fucking scams. Okay? So, bottom line, folks, just ask yourself why these guys have to cater to YouTube. That's the thing. Once you understand that YouTube is the world's largest platform for idiots, the audience on YouTube is filled with fucking idiots. Once you come to understand that, and then you realize that's why all the scammers are pitching their fucking bullshit on YouTube, then you'll realize to stay away from YouTube. The last thing you're going to do is you're going to listen to somebody on YouTube. But the problem is that you don't know any better. You say, well, I don't know anything else. This is all I know. So you don't have a perspective. You see, you don't realize there's people that have legitimate businesses, credible professionals. But guess what? You don't need to. You don't need to. All you need to do, if you want to invest, they made it simple for you. Just buy the S&P 500 index and forget about it. That's it. That's all you got to do. You see? And then realize when people like Grant Cardone are telling you that they can show you how to make $1 million off your first deal, and it's easy, it's simple, you don't need any money, you don't need any credit. When you realize you're hearing those lines, you're listening to an absolute con artist. Okay? That's what people, I just don't understand. There needs to be some type of curriculum in junior high and high school these days with the internet to adjust for the internet, to teach people about these con artists, because they're everywhere. They weren't all over the place before the internet. They weren't even all over the place 10 years ago. There needs to be curriculums in high school to teach people about this shit, because obviously people don't get it.
terms of getting back as an investor, if it's coming down to here, almost irrespective of what's going on, I have to believe, if I have to make a call in advance, and of course I can change depending on what happens, but I have to believe this is where you want to start doing that 18, 17, around there. Their earnings report is a complete game changer, at least for quite a while. Bottom line, NVIDIA now is going to enter the realm of Tesla, Apple, and all these other big, I mean, listen, NVIDIA can come down to 150, come down to $100. If you don't think it's possible, then you don't understand how the market works. I mean, listen, NVIDIA can come down to 150, come down to $100. If you don't think it's possible, then you don't understand how the market works.